Hello, I am Dr. Vonda Wright, and this is Hot for Your Health, a podcast where every week we bring you unforgettable experts, personalities, and innovators who share insights and the innovations they bring that were once only science fiction, but today are your health reality. In this episode of Hot for Your Health, I am so excited to bring to you Dr. John Lipman. Now, Dr. Lipman and I have known each other for 11 years as we served on the inaugural and continuing board of ShareCare. Now, you may know ShareCare is healthcare all in one place, founded by Jeff Arnold, who is the founder of WebMD, and Dr. Oz, and the woman everybody admires, Oprah. So John and I have known each other for a long time, but he is a board-certified interventional radiologist and renowned authority in the non-surgical treatment of uterine fibroids. And this may be the first place you have ever heard of the non-surgical treatment. So we're really excited to have him. From an educational standpoint, he has been to all of the best places, from Georgetown for medical school. He went to the Brigham and Women's, which is a Harvard hospital, and a fellowship at Yale. And so Dr. Lipman is an Ivy League doctor who is so innovative that he's probably going to talk about things you've never really heard. He practices in Atlanta and is the founder and medical director of the Atlanta Fibroid Center, which is a state-of-the-art medical facility specializing in the non-surgical treatment of uterine fibroids. And literally, women come from all over the world to see you, John. And we're so psyched to have you today. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. This is really important stuff that you're doing. It's a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about, in your series of women's health conversations, something that I've been passionate about for a long time. I helped in the development of a procedure called uterine fibroid embolization, which is a non-surgical treatment for women struggling with fibroids. So unfortunately, most women in this country, when they're faced with symptoms from uterine fibroids, often hear only about surgical options. And unfortunately, that's not the only option available, even though that's what they'll be told. And UFE, uterine fibroid embolization, is an outpatient procedure. It's completely non-surgical. It treats all the fibroids in the uterus. It has a very high success rate, over 90%. And it's been available for 25 years now. I've been doing it here in Atlanta.
Wow.
For about 25 years. So it's not anything new or experimental. It's well proven. The problem is, unfortunately, most women suffering with this issue just don't hear about it from their gynecologist, which is a real shame because it's one of the biggest breakthroughs for women. But it's just, despite a long track record, it's just unknown, relatively speaking.
Well, you know what? Let's go back a minute and educate me. How do women even know that they have fibroids? How do they know that? Because if you're going to tell me, which maybe you are, that this is something that can be generational or their mother has, how do women even know that this is not normal?
Right. Well,
educate us here.
Fibroids are the most common pelvic tumor seen in women. So it's very common to begin with. It's particularly common in African-American women. Probably 80% of adult African-American women have these benign tumors. It's the most common reason why women have heavy periods. So oftentimes that's the presenting symptom, that women have heavy periods, although frankly, sometimes women don't recognize what really is heavy because they've been doing it for so long, or their mom who suffered with fibroids, she was a heavy bleeder too.
Yeah.
So they don't realize what actually normal and abnormal really is, but that's the most common presenting symptom. These tumors are hard and firm. They're like rocks. And so they press on things. And depending on their location in the uterus, the ones that are underneath the lining, those are called submucosal fibroids. Those are the ones that cause the bleeding. But there are other fibroids, subserosal ones, underneath the outer covering, kind of grow away from the uterus and press on the bladder to cause urinary frequency, press on the cervix to cause painful intercourse, the bowel to cause constipation, pelvic pain. It can cause sciatica and confuse people that they think they have a lower back issue. It's really their fibroid. So they can cause a lot of misery. And so that's how they present. They will go to their gynecologist and they will be examined. And if their uterus is enlarged on physical exam, they will be described as a certain size pregnancy. and they'll do the confirming diagnosis. They'll say, yeah, your uterus is big. I can feel some fibroids. Let's get an ultrasound to confirm it. And they'll get an ultrasound in their office and confirm that the woman has fibroids, and then we'll go from there.
So you know what, I just learned so much from you, because as an orthopedic surgeon, you can imagine that I have a waiting room full of people with low back pain and sciatica. And, I'm a hip surgeon. And so I always talk about the fact that before someone gets to me with a true hip problem, they have seen 3.3 doctors and it's taken 18 months. So I can only imagine how long it takes people to figure out that their real problem is a uterine fibroid pressing outward on some other vital organ. And so now I'm going to, I see practice. I'm not going to stop at the back. I'm going to figure out the uterus for these people.
Yeah, I've been sent patients. A good friend of mine who's an orthopedic surgeon where I used to work at sent me a patient. He's like, I think she's got fibroids. I can't find anything wrong with her back. I see patients from chiropractors. They do x-rays in their office and they see these big calcified fibroids with lower back issues. And so I'll see patients from there. It can be really confusing. I've seen a number of patients that have chronic constipation and have had a mega GI workup, upper and lower endoscopy, barium enemas.
Right.
It's a mechanical thing. They got a big fibroid at the back of the uterus pressing on their colon. Their GI tract is fine.
Wow.
So it's really important to kind of put it all together. Everybody, all the specialists are kind of looking at their little area.
Of course.
And you kind of got to go back and take a 10,000 foot view.
Well, how are you? I know you're very present on social media, and everybody listening to this today we'll give Dr. Lipman an opportunity at the end of the show to tell you where to find him, but you should Google him. But how do women even figure this out? Because I'm going to tell you, I'm a very highly educated woman. I've been around you for a very long time. And in 10 minutes, I've learned a ton of stuff. So how do people in the community even know what's going on or find you or not give up hope?
Well, as I say, if you've got symptoms from fibroids, the big three are heavy periods, pelvic pain, and increased urinary frequency. So if you have those symptoms, likely, and particularly if you're an African-American woman, likely you have fibroids. And so reaching out to a physician who's expert in fibroids, usually it's a gynecologist. They certainly can come see me if they think it's fibroids, but if they're in this area. But those are the main symptoms. And then it's, as I say, it's confirmed on a physical exam or ultrasound. We use what's called MRI, which is really a much better imaging tool than ultrasound, because ultrasound, unfortunately, while it can diagnose fibroids easily, it underestimates the fibroid burden. And so we want to get a really good look, and we go over that in the office, whether we're in person or we're doing a teleconsult like this.
Well, that's very helpful to me, because now as I'm working up a hip, I can include the lower abdomen to look at fibroid burden. One thing that I'm thinking is that women just got to keep asking questions, right? I have all these things. I've got low back pain. I've got constipation. It just cannot be 12 different problems in one area. There has to be an origin. And so This is something they should think about. But you brought a very special person with you today to really talk about her experience of what I'm in awe about. Is like, how do we even know?
Well, I'll let Marie introduce herself, but yes, she has all of the symptoms as well as, her journey was a very typical one. Unfortunately, I wish her journey was the exception, but unfortunately, it's the rule. And I'll let her tell her story in her own words, but, most women struggling with this never hear about UFE and the embolization procedure that we do, or if they do, it's because the woman knows about it, or in Marie's case, she really had to kind of break down and be in tears, hoping that there was something else because she really didn't want surgery. And I don't blame her. I wouldn't want surgery either. So at the last minute, she did find out about this, but it really should have been up front. It should have been at the initial discussion. You should have this discussion with your doctor about these are the different treatment options, these are the risks and benefits, and let the patient decide rather than saying, you need surgery. Are you sure? Yes. You need a hysterectomy. Is there anything else? No, that's what you need. And unfortunately, that's what is happening in most of the time. And so if you don't know about UFE or don't know to ask about it, you will often get unnecessary surgery. I can't tell you how many women would never have agreed to hysterectomy. The average age in this country is 39, and I've met way too many women under 30 never would have agreed to it, but they were suffering. They decided, okay, you win. There's nothing else. I'll have a hysterectomy, and they're miserable. It's really heartbreaking.
Well, and you know what? Before Marie, you tell us your story, I am sitting here. I'm almost in tears, John, because you may know that I had my first and only biologic child at 40, right? And I am not alone. I am a professional woman who spent 22 years on her education. There's an entire generation of millennial women who are not getting married right after college or not partnering up. They are spending 10 years building their careers, establishing themselves. And maybe in their 30s, they're starting to couple up and, think about settling down.
I've got 2 daughters just like that.
If we're taking uteruses out of all the professional young women in this country, WTF, John? I
know.
Sorry, audience, you got to get to know me. I'm a surgeon. WTF are we doing? Marie, I am so thankful that you are here today. You are going to change the lives of so many women by telling your story.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Well, first, I just wanted to say that I had to go through 7 doctors before I found Dr. Lipman. And 5 of them told me that I needed a hysterectomy. Mm-hmm. The other 2, the only reason is because they were ER doctors. They weren't specialists. But all 5 gynecologists that I saw told me that I needed a hysterectomy. And the only reason I found Dr. Lipman was my husband was listening to the radio, a women's radio channel, kind of similar to this, and he heard women sharing their stories. And that's how we found out about Dr. Lipman, and I'm so grateful.
Why didn't you just take the advice? I mean, you were such an amazing advocate for yourself. Why didn't you just say, oh my God, 5 doctors have told me this? What gave you that persistence? Because other women can benefit from your thought process.
Well, I was very scared. Actually, in the beginning, like you were talking about, I didn't even know I was sick. I thought heavy periods were just normal for some women. But the first doctor I saw said that I needed a hysterectomy. By the way, 5 of those doctors, they all did ultrasounds and told me I had about 1 or 2 fibroids. Mm-hmm. And I found out that wasn't the case when I saw Dr. Lipman. But, I don't have children. I don't plan on having children, but I wanted to keep my uterus. I have family members and friends who have had hysterectomies and they've suffered long-term effects from it where they had a prolapse, they had to have surgery for that. Mm-hmm. It was very scary for me. Yeah. And just being a woman. Mm-hmm. So, my husband and my sister both told me, don't do a hysterectomy. And my husband promised me when I broke down in tears in the doctor's office, who said, there's nothing else that can be done. Your only option is hysterectomy. Mm-hmm. He said, I will walk to the ends of the earth. I promise you, my husband said, until we find a doctor that will help you and you get to keep your uterus. And to be honest, in that office, that last doctor that I saw, I had given up hope 100%. I broke down in tears. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until the doctor saw me in tears that he said, well, there's one more thing you can try. I doubt it's going to work. And he said, but if you want to try it, have at it. Mm-hmm. And he walked out of the office and didn't even come back in. He sent the medical assistant with a packet. And my husband took it. And that's when he remembered he heard the women sharing their story a year back. Mm-hmm. You know how your memory and your brain works, and everything started clicking. So we went home that day. I was in tears. I was a mess. I didn't tell my husband, but even though he told me I'm not giving up on you. I'd already given up, because the reason I'd given up is because I'd had a transfusion. I was basically bleeding to death.
Oh.
And one doctor, this was in the beginning when I didn't even know I was sick, called me and said, you need to go to the ER right now, because if you don't, you could go to sleep and never wake up again, or you can faint and never wake up again and just shut down for good. So my thought process was that day when I saw that last doctor was, well, either I lose my uterus and live, or I keep my uterus and literally bleed to death. And I'd given hope. I thought, you know what? I have to let go of my uterus. That's it. If I don't want to die, that's what I have to do. So I went home that evening and my husband disappeared. And I was like, where are you? I need you. I'm having a meltdown here. I'm having a breakdown. And I just sat in the recliner at home crying and just preparing myself to lose my uterus, because I thought, I can't die. I can't bleed to death. I was bleeding to death. A couple hours later, my husband came into the living room and said, love, I want you to watch this documentary. He said, there's this doctor, Dr. Lipman in Atlanta, Georgia, and you have to watch this documentary. And I said to him, no. And I got angry at him and I said, get away from me. Just go away. There's nothing that can be done. And he said, please. He begged me.
Oh.
He said, please watch. But you have to understand, at this point, I'd already been through all the doctors. I'd been suffering a year already.
And you had pivoted in your mind. You had to save your mental health. You had to pivot in your mind and let go, as if it's kind of the hard decision families make at the end of life, right?
Exactly.
And you didn't want to tear yourself through and tear the scab off again of having to reconsider that there might be something different to do. And I feel terrible that you were in that much despair.
Right. I was suffering. That's another reason I decided to give up my uterus and to have a hysterectomy, because I couldn't work. I was at home. I had to sit in one spot. I wasn't sleeping at night because if I moved 1 centimeter, I would have this flow. I was tired of having accidents, waking up in the middle of the night, taking all my bedding, putting it in the washer and dryer. Even at the ER, the nurse was overwhelmed with me. I mean, I was bleeding and gushing blood and clot on her shoes, on the bed, on the floor. It was like a horror movie. It was gory. And she looked like she was about to have a breakdown, because it was on her, on me, on the floor. You can hear it just, splattering on the floor. But what I'm trying to say is I'd been through so much.
You're just done.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And my husband begged me. He said, please watch this documentary. And it's Dr. Lipman's Freedom from Fibroids.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it, and I finally watched it after he begged me. And I can't tell you how almost instantly my whole thought process changed. I had hope, and I said, okay, let's do this. But we live in Michigan as well, so we had to figure that out.
Get down here. But John, are you telling me, both of you, that this is not just 1 week a month? It's
lengthy. It can last.
Work, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Actually, mine lasted a year. I went from.
It lasted a year.
Without a break. I actually went from, I actually started with, first it was 7 days, then it was 9 days, then it was 12, 14 days. Then it became, with a healthy normal period, it's 1 week of a period, 3 weeks of no period. Mine became 3 weeks of bleeding and 1 week of no period. And then it became bleeding every day. So my last year, I bled every day.
So, John, what, from a biology perspective, you've already explained to us the two of the locations that fibroids can be external, pressing on the back, for instance, and internal within the muscle of the uterus, pressing internally. So, what happens that causes this transfusion necessary bleeding? Is it an arteries eroded? Is it, what happens?
Well, what happens is the submucosal fibroids, the ones we talked about that are right up underneath the lining, those are the culprits that cause this heavy crime scene periods, because for a woman to stop her period, the most of the uterus, the vast majority of it is muscular. And so this contraction wave makes it to the surface and constricts the small, tiny bleeding vessels. There are also some local factors in play. But if you've got this rock, that contraction wave never makes it to the surface. So eventually, in most people, it will stop eventually, but not always. And so you'll get these horrific periods like Marie described. And so, you start running this deficit of iron and hemoglobin. You put out way more blood than you can possibly replace.
Sure.
So you become anemic.
Yeah.
And those are some of the presenting symptoms that people will come into my office. They're tired, chronically fatigued. They get migraine-like headaches every month. They're lightheaded or dizzy. They may get palpitations. Their heart races because it's got to work harder because there's less circulating red cells. Mm-hmm. They will chew and crave ice. And when I ask them about it, I go, do you chew or crave ice? They're like, whoa. They think I'm clairvoyant. They can't believe I know about that. Right. And these women will just chew and crave ice. In Georgia, they chew what's called the Georgia white clay. It's kaolin, essentially. It's the clay ingredient in kaopectate. We have a lot of Georgia white clay, and it's crunchy. And so chewing those sorts of things is called pica, but it's due to a chronic iron deficiency anemia. And those are very common symptoms that I see every day in the office.
That's remarkable. And the ice chewing is just trying to replace the dehydration, right?
Yeah, it's a volume thing primarily, but there's also a crunchy component there. And people will chew crunchy things, and there'll be sometimes there's very bizarre things. They'll do Argo cornstarch is a very common one. Wow. They'll just crunch it. So that's a very common one. As I say, the Georgia white clay in these parts is common. And unfortunately, most people, in fact, I saw a recent article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution talking about these dirt and clay eaters. And isn't that funny? And isn't that bizarre? But they never explained what that was about. Why are these women doing it? It was really disappointing. They were getting the superficial bizarre, like, isn't this crazy? It's like, please tell them it's about, you've got fibroids, you're having horrible periods, you can get this fixed.
Well, you know what, John, like so many things. And Maria, Marie, the next thing I'm going to ask you is, you finally made it to Atlanta. We're going to talk about what actually happened to you in Dr. Lipman's office. But you know what, John, I want to comment that like so many things in medicine and heart disease, pain and orthopedic surgery, pica, right? You have just explained to me a true physiologic reason why people chew dirt, which is what pica is, which is normally only attributed to being crazy or mental health. It's the same thing when a woman goes to a cardiologist and says, I think there's something going on because I am exhausted. I can't sleep. And because we do not present like a man, I am not the most liberated woman. You know what, John? I love men. You know my husband. I am not a bra burner. I have become so feministic when it comes to, can we please listen to women? Yes. We know something bad is going on in us. And if we're eating clay, it's not only because we're crazy.
Right.
Right? So for all of you doctors out there, can you just please listen to the women who come to you and not blow them off? Because there is a wisdom that comes from knowing your body as well as a woman does. Because anybody who bleeds every month, which all women do, we know what that feels like, right? And if we tell you something's different in our bodies, it's likely because we've listened long enough. So anyway, Maria, you came from Michigan. You came all the way down here to the south, where I am in now, the same city with Dr. Lipman. Found him at the Atlanta Fibroid Center. And then what happened?
Well, first, I wanted to say that because we lived in Michigan, we didn't want to go all the way to Georgia, all the way to Atlanta. So we actually called one of the most prestigious medical hospitals one of the most prestigious facilities here.
Yep.
And after we found out what UFE was, and my husband made the call, and as soon as he hung up, he said, nope, we're going to see Dr. Lipman. I said, what happened? He said, well, they do UFE, but there's nothing in their voice or tone that made me feel that they believe that it works or that they even want to do it. So he said, we are going to go see Dr. Lipman because he believes in this and he believes that it works. And I said, okay.
Such skepticism in medicine, John.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm an interventional radiologist, and interventional radiologists are the physicians that do UFE. A lot of interventional radiologists kind of do a lot of things, but not any one thing really well. If they try to be all things to all people, and they may not feel very comfortable doing embolization. It is a specific skill. And so depending on where, just like anything else, you know, not every orthopedic surgeon is really good at joint replacement or, you know, whatever. There are niches, and
That's got it. Mm-hmm.
you got to find that person that's passionate about it. Because, you know, I don't take care of peripheral vascular disease. A lot of interventional radiologists do. And you don't want me taking care of your peripheral vascular disease, quite frankly. And so you got to find that niche, that person that does a lot of this. I do UFE every single day, day in and day out, and it makes a difference.
Oh, sure it does. Marie, you finally got to Atlanta.
Well, I just want to say one more thing before that the first time we called Dr. Lipman's office, I have to say that's where my healing began, because every single person that answered the phone, and that makes a difference in the type of treatment you receive. I mean, it was a contrast between all the other offices I've called and when I called Dr. Lipman. I mean, they were professional. They listened. You get VIP service. I felt like a princess from the first call. And that's important.
As you should.
Because I'd been through so much. And not only that, I'd had doctors who got upset with me just for telling them what I've been through, you know, and got frustrated with me. I was actually by that time a little scared and timid to call because, you know, I just felt like, I don't know, I was going to get in trouble or somebody's going to get frustrated with me.
I hate that story.
You know?
I hate that.
So,
sorry.
Dr. Lipman's treatment, they treat you like a princess. And not only that, I did not have to lift a finger. I mean, everything was set up. Everything was figured out on how we would do this, the video consultations, where you're going to stay, you know, everything. So when I got there, which the journey down, I mean, well, that's another story. It was difficult because I had an IUD, which was Band-Aid fix, and it had to be removed. And Dr. Lipman warned me, look, as soon as they remove it, jump in the car and start driving because you're going to
unsuppress, right? You're going to be
Exactly.
no more suppression, right?
Exactly. Yep. But I got there and my husband dropped me off in the morning. You know, we took our dog with us. We don't have children, so she's our daughter.
Yeah.
And he had to stay in the car with our dog because we didn't want to leave her at a kennel. Mm-hmm. And he was really stressed out because, you know, we hadn't seen Dr. Lipman's office. And it just turned out that we were able to park our car right there. My husband went in to speak to Dr. Lipman for a few minutes. And he said, I was so happy because I could see our dog almost, you know, right. And I know she's okay because you parked right in front. He walked inside. He went, you know, we were stressed out. We thought we had to park far and we don't know what we'll do with our dog and go with. We didn't know how we're going to figure this out, but we got there and we literally parked in front of the door. My husband went in to talk to Dr. Lipman and they got me ready for surgery. You know, they prepped me.
Procedure. We don't do surgery now.
Oh, I'm sorry. The procedure. Yes,
it's an embolization, my friend. It's not a
yes.
No surgery. We don't do surgery.
It's not surgery. It's procedure. I'm sorry. We were in there at 7:30, and I was out by, I believe it was around noon.
Right.
Yep. It was around noon, and I'd had
the Band-Aid.
And just one Band-Aid, one tiny little Band-Aid.
That's about as micro procedure as you can get there, Dr. Lipman.
It was just one tiny little Band-Aid and I was out of there. I couldn't believe it because I'd had, other surgeries that were very painful and horrible that didn't even do anything for me.
So the embolization procedure not only was inpatient, in the morning, out in the afternoon, like I like to say, through one poke hole that was covered by a Band-Aid.
Right.
But then you walked out, and how did you feel? And you had no pain. And then what happened?
My husband took me to the hotel. I was out. I was, just tired from the journey, the stress and all of it. So I pretty much just stayed at home and watched TV.
And what is the post-procedure natural history, the follow-up? What happens then?
Usually the recovery is about 5 or 6 days. And we tell patients that kind of anticipate, kind of a crampy pain stuff afterwards. The fibroids are angry. We've suffocated them. So we've knocked out all the fibroids. And so there's going to be pain afterwards. That's usually managed with prescription strength Motrin for 5 days. And then for a day or two, we add a narcotic as needed. And so people might be on a narcotic for a day or two. They're on this prescription Motrin for 5 days. And by a week, if not sooner, they're back at work.
But tell me what you do through that poke hole. You seek to destroy the artery to each fibroid, right? You can see it via interventional radiology techniques. Just describe. I've never seen this procedure. I might come watch you.
Yeah, absolutely. You should come watch.
Yeah.
You'd really be amazed. But we take a tiny catheter the size of a piece of spaghetti and negotiate it into each uterine artery separately under X-ray guidance. Each uterine artery branches like a tree, getting smaller and smaller branches till you get out to the leaves of the tree. The fibroids are the leaves. And I know what size those tiny peripheral branches are, and I can flow direct these particles to plug up each and every fibroid blood supply. So without a blood supply, these fibroids will die. And as they die, they soften and shrink. And as that occurs over days to weeks, the woman's symptoms start going away. In fact, that's how this procedure got discovered, because it was totally by accident, as a lot of things are in medicine. We'd been embolizing tumors for many years. Usually they were malignant cancerous tumors, but somebody got the bright idea in France in the mid-1990s to say, well, why don't we, before a hysterectomy, because fibroids are very vascular, why don't we embolize them and then it'll be an easier hysterectomy?
Yes.
Well, the problem in France is that it's socialized medicine, but I guess thank goodness it is, because what happened was they were embolized and then they went home and spent 6 or 7, 8 weeks waiting for their hysterectomy. And what happened? Those patients' symptoms started going away. And so they would contact their gynecologist and say, wait a minute, my bleeding is gone. My pain is gone. Do I still need that hysterectomy?
Wow.
And the answer was no. All you needed was the embolization. You didn't need the second part.
That's so amazing.
Yeah, so the gynecologist called his friend of his, who was the chief of gynecology at UCLA at the time, and said, you better get the interventional radiologist on this. It's really, this is something exciting. So Scott Goodwin, who was the chief of interventional radiology at UCLA, did the first 11 patients in the United States, and he was presenting his data at this big radiology meeting, and I was presenting my data on embolization for liver tumors, malignant liver tumors. And I'm listening to Scott. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So I then went back to Atlanta and did the first one here in Georgia and have been doing them ever since.
That is a remarkable story about, it's like penicillin. It's a serendipity of being creative. But for those of you who are listening, I just want to go back, because somebody out there, until you just explained it, is probably thinking, wait a minute. If he's cutting off the blood supply to the uterus, how come we're not killing the uterus? But what you said was, the diameter of the smallest vessel, and floating means, and correct me if I'm wrong, we let blood carry this little catheter until it gets stuck in the smallest vessels, which feed the fibroid. So you're not touching the uterus blood supply. It's tiniest.
It's not 100%. It's not 100% fibroid vessel and 0 regular vessel, but it's almost that way. It's very selective to the fibroid blood supply. There is some that's going to affect, but fortunately, the uterus is so richly collateralized, there is some transient ischemia, and that's what the patient is feeling, the normal myometrial ischemia, but then it goes away because it's so richly collateralized versus fibroids, which have no collateral supply. Once they're plugged up, that fibroid is dead. And it doesn't matter if you have 1 or 100 or how big or how small, you get them all, typically.
Wow.
So just to paraphrase, the rock hard fibroid has one vessel. The uterus itself has a tree branch network of collaterals. It gets more blood. But Marie, how long until you felt better?
As I was listening to you guys talking, I started remembering they put in an IUD as a Band-Aid, just to kind of slow it down a little bit, but I was still bleeding every single day. And Dr. Lipman had warned me, when they remove it, jump in the car and come down. Yeah. Well, on day 2 of driving, I had an episode. He was absolutely right. Day 2, I had an episode. I had to stop at Starbucks, and I was stuck in there for half an hour. I was wearing diapers also, and tampons, diapers, the whole works. And I had an episode where I was in the bathroom. I went to change. Everything came out on the floor, and I was in the bathroom with paper towels, people knocking on the door, and I'm taking the paper towels, even though most of it fell because I kept my diaper between my knees. Most of it fell in the diaper, but so much more fell on the floor. And I was in there with paper towels panicking. And I'm telling you this because this is the day before surgery. After
word. I'm not a surgeon.
I'm sorry, procedure. I'm so sorry. Procedure. I'm not a medical person.
That's okay. That's okay. The day before the procedure.
Procedure. Yes. I apologize. I'm not a medical person, so I keep using the wrong terms. The day before the procedure, that was happening to me inside the Starbucks bathroom. And I remember asking, well, how long is it going to take for this bleeding to subside? And you know what? From the first day, I couldn't believe it. They told me, look, you're going to have a little bit of bleeding. You know, it's just from the procedure, and it's going to be about a week or 2. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it from the first day, the first week. I wasn't using a tampon. I wasn't using a diaper. I was using just a light pad. Yeah. That was it. Just one light pad from the first day and the first week.
Listen, any woman out there listening and any men will not even understand, but every woman will understand the sheer terror of bleeding through your clothes in a place that you cannot control. I cannot imagine the story you've just told me. And, you know, John, women must have PTSD from the terror of living like this.
Yes.
And the fact that you can give people a semblance, not only a semblance, give them their life back. Every woman can handle a pad. But to have to live in the terror of wearing a diaper in public and bleeding out from an organ that is supposed to give life to people.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Right. I mean, there's over 1 million women in the United States that are these silent sufferers. They don't want surgery. They pad themselves up and try to keep it moving like Marie. I mean, they don't want an operation, and I don't blame them. And unfortunately, some of them succumb to hysterectomy, but there's just so many women on the sidelines, and everything that they do revolves around this menstrual. It decides whether they can work or not. It decides whether they can have social events. It decides whether they can have relations. Everything they do is predicated on this miserable, awful crime scene period each month. And it's dread. It infiltrates your whole life. And then once you get the UFE, it's transformational. Not only mentally relief, physical relief. Now you don't bleed so much. You can build your iron and hemoglobin back to normal. They have energy like they haven't had in years. They can exercise. They can have relations. It's transformative, and it's so relatively simple if they just knew about UFE.
With the rise of women within the last 2 years, even when we're talking about getting a seat at the table, taking our place as 51% of the population, having choices before we're desperate, the whole pro-choice, which I don't want to get into that today. I want women to have choices before they're desperate. What this does for women, it allows them never to get into that panic situation that I am so sorry, Marie, you lived with for a whole year. Because we deserve to have smart, savvy choices before we're desperate. And
Right.
we deserve to have people listening to us and saying not only, here's what you have to do because this is the only thing I know how to do. People, whether they're men or women, deserve to know the full spectrum of choices. And this is how I practice. And maybe I don't do as many surgeries as my colleagues do, but I start with, you could do nothing. You're probably not going to do that because you're here today. But here are all the non-procedure choices. Here are the procedure choices, and here's the surgery choice. I think people deserve to know, right? And John, I'm like your newest big cheerleader about the transformational medicine you're delivering.
No one talks about the mental stuff, and that's such a big part of this because I just wrote an article for Rolling Out magazine here in Atlanta. Well, it's a part of a series I'm doing called Dear Fibroids, I'm tired of bleeding this much. Dear Fibroids, I'm tired of waking up every night to pee. Dear Fibroids, it's these letters to the fibroids. Well, one of them was, Dear Fibroids, I'm tired of keeping it moving. Because this disproportionately affects Black women feel this incredible, I don't know what the right word is, but it's a loyalty not only to themselves, when they go to work, because a lot of them work in male-dominated workplaces that don't understand about female problems. Mm-hmm. They have to keep it moving. They just have to suck it up, and it's really a shame, the mental toll on this. So they not only feel a responsibility for themselves and having to go to work, because people don't understand if you don't show up to work, you're labeled as a not as good of a worker. They don't understand the toll that the bleeding and all this does to them every month. They also feel a responsibility for who's coming next after them, because there's not many women of color in the workplace where they are. They feel a responsibility, not to let them down, the next person. It's amazing. So they just keep it moving. They can't afford to be out of work for 2 months with a hysterectomy. They can't afford not to be present and just keep it moving. And it was a really powerful piece, I thought.
So Marie, you were feeling pretty good very soon.
Yes, I couldn't believe it.
How long ago was your procedure?
It was last year, October.
What has become your new normal?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I've never been this intimate with my underwear. I've never been this intimate. It's just me and my underwear, nothing in between. I mean,
full underwear, right? You can do anything you want now with your lingerie.
I feel so free. I mean, we go hiking and I can go and do things without thinking, oh, I should take 20 tampons with me, because there was a time in my life where I was changing every few minutes.
Oh my God.
And leaving the house without having to think about that. Also, I'm a mechanical engineer. Before I saw Dr. Lipman, I was able to work with the IUD, but it wasn't a fix. It was just something that slowed down the bleeding. But I would be in our meetings, in our engineering meetings, and my job, I was the only female engineer. I lost my job. I was laid off due to COVID, but I was the only female engineer out of 14 engineers. And when you're around women, you have that support. You can say, hey, I'm having a heavy period. Can you just watch me? Because I've had accidents where I didn't feel anything, and I've had accidents where I felt that warm flow. Yeah. But I've had the scary accidents are the one where you don't feel it and you stand up and you just
around
everywhere.
So you got a bunch of male engineers. They're not going to be that supportive. And
exactly. And that's where the PTSD comes from,
that's that mental aspect. Yep.
Because I'm like, what if it's one of those ones that I don't feel? And talk about PTSD. I've had moments where I thought I felt something. This is after I got better. And I would panic and run in the bathroom, pull my pants down, and there's nothing, But my life, you've heard, you've heard women say to men, well, when they're frustrated with some man in their life, they say, well, who do you think you are? God's gift to women? Well, let me tell you something. I have literally met God's gift to women. And it is Dr. Lipman. My husband
Wow.
and I have said this. I said, he is the living being, God's gift to women. And I told my husband, I said, there is a special place in heaven for this man because he saved my life. He saved my uterus. I said, he is literally a gift that God gave me, because my life has changed completely. I mean, it's a miracle. I can't believe that I'm living this way.
And John, if you ever doubted why you went to all those religious schools, to change Marie's life alone would have been worth 22 years of education.
It's what keeps me coming to work every day. I mean, I love what I do, and it's so heartwarming to hear stories like that. And I'm just grateful. I love my staff is phenomenal. They do a great job. I mean, that's the nice thing about where I am. I get to control the entire process. In my previous life, when I was actually in the hospital, working at a hospital like a regular interventional radiologist, I didn't have control of the processes. The hospital hires all the personnel. It was still a reflection of me, and I felt frustrated. And I knew that building our own center and having control of all the process would make it so much better, because I knew we could do a much better job. The hospitals talk about customer service, but we live it, we breathe it, we talk it every day. I only hire the most positive people. In fact, I stole a concept from a very successful restaurateur called Danny Meyer. I recommend his book. He's got all these successful restaurants in New York City, and New York City restaurants that's so cutthroat, but he's managed to be so successful. And his concept is, he doesn't hire for IQ, intellect. He hires for personality and the ability for people to, take joy in pleasing other people. It's called hospitality quotient. And that's how we hire. We hire the most positive people. I can teach them the small things that they need to know, but either you have it or you don't, the hospitality quotient. And that's what we hire for. And it's been just tremendous results. I mean, I love my practice. I love the people I work with.
Well, that is so evident. And I am so thankful today, John, that you would take the time we're recording on a Saturday morning, to share this really life-changing procedure. And Marie, I'm incredibly thankful that you are living the life you envision with your beautiful dog out in the mountains right now, and that you found this option. So I think, John, in our episode notes, we'll list not only where to find you, but the other questions that come with any procedure. That part of them you've answered, how long it takes, what the risks are, and just so we give a full picture. But today I want to end on this amazing note that I don't even know how to summarize. I am so inspired that medicine can continue to change the lives of real people in ways that give so much joy, because being a physician of any kind is very hard, and doctors are talking about it all over social media now. But in this episode of Hot for Your Health, you have all heard why we do it, why we give up 22 years in our youth to learn to do things, because to change the life of one woman like Marie is totally worth it. I mean, this made my week to have this conversation.
Well, I mean, you see it the same in your practice in orthopedics. I mean, when they finally are able to move and be mobile, and when they haven't been, and restoring someone's mobility is a gift as well. I mean, it's just,
life-changing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, this is something my husband helped me realize. I just want to tell women, you can choose and not settle. You choose for the treatment that you want.
Absolutely.
You get to choose what type of treatment you want to receive and what they're going to do to your body. You know, the doctors might lie to you and tell you that hysterectomy is your only option. But whatever you're going through, do all the research and you get to choose. They don't get to tell you what.
Yeah, it would be great for every doctor to be able to do that as they're supposed to, explain the risks and benefits of all the different treatment options. Unfortunately, most women struggling with fibroids only hear about surgery, which is it's really unfortunate. And not that everything on the internet is gospel, but using the internet as a tool to be an advocate for your own health. And really try to see, are there any other options that can help me? And just don't settle, as you said. There's so many women out there that are, wishing, as you were, that there's some other option. They just know in their heart of hearts there must be. There can't just be hysterectomy. And UFE is a real godsend, but unfortunately, you got to know about it.
What you've pointed out is at the heart of Women's Health Conversations, which is the nonprofit. John, you've spoken at our conferences, and Hot for Your Health is the podcast that comes out of it. But I'm a huge advocate for exactly what you've said. Women and men, all of us have a responsibility to be our own advocate and take responsibility for our own health. Gone are the days of patriarchal medicine where we just sit back and do whatever, right? If we don't take that responsibility, we are abdicating our ability to influence our own lives. So you and your husband took personal responsibility to not accept the answer you got and continue searching. And that's what I encourage every person, whether they're in my office, on this podcast, out in the community. You must take control of your own health because it's you, it's nobody else. So Dr. Lipman, thank you so much for being here with us today. And Marie Williams, we are indebted to you for telling the story. One last thing, John, briefly tell people where to find you again. So when they're listening, they know exactly what to do.
Well, our website is atlii.com. atlii.com. Our website has a lot of information on fibroids, on the UFE procedure. We're on Instagram. It's dr_ my last name. So it's dr_LIPMAN. And we have a YouTube channel, Atlanta Fibroid Center. YouTube channel has over 150 videos on all sorts of different things in women's health, primarily fibroids and the UFE procedure. And lastly, we have that documentary that Marie mentioned. Anyone can watch it. It's fibroidfilm.com.